Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I'm Sean Butler. There's Bugsy Malone. We're doing the things that we love to do, or she loves to do. I'm not a huge fan. Do you mind me asking you for some favours whilst I wish you all of the health and happiness in the world? Can you like the like button for me? Hit the like button for me even on the video if you enjoy the content. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. We're 200 people away from 25k, all very exciting. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's videos. We're going to get through the transfer news, views and clues, guys. And then if there's time at the end, maybe spend a little bit of time talking about Manchester United and the FA Cup victory. Because, you know, on Twitter it's trending, or Levy Out is trending, I think, and Daniel Levy and Enoch are trending, which, you know, some people will naturally want to go down that path and perceive someone else's success to mean this is Daniel Levy's fault. It is what it is. It is what it is. It doesn't bother me. I'd say each to their own, however you want to feel. Everyone's opinion on Tottenham is somewhat valid in my mind. So we'll talk about that if we can at the end. Let's start though with the transfer news, views and clues updates. First off, Danny Olmo. The links to Tottenham started, what was it, a couple of weeks ago? We brought them to your attention. £51 million buyout clause available for, I think, up until the middle of August, I believe, which will be interesting. The problem is when you've got a player that's that good, that's available for that much money, then the list of suitors probably won't be short. Tottenham, you would imagine, have a financial situation where they can move fast if they want to, and not every team that might be able to suit or be suitors of the player can do that. They may have to wait until the next financial year, so you know, July the 1st, in order to make the numbers work from a PSR perspective. They may need to sell before they buy. Don't know. But in any event, Fabrizio Romano has come out and acknowledged that Tottenham are interested in the player, but so too are Bayern Munich, a new name that's coming onto the list. And when you hear those sorts of stories, you know, you don't know what's happening at Bayern Munich. You don't know how advanced they are in their plan with, you know, Vincent Kompany. Is he going to be the guy? And do the players want to really go there and be a part of that new revolution, that new evolution of Bayern Munich? Does it have the same draw as it would do if it had a, you know, a top tier name manager there? Not sure. I'm not sure, but for sure there is a narrative that can play out that, you know, they've got the Euros coming up. If Danny Olmo does well for Spain in the Euros, then he will be of higher desirability. Does he want to go back to Spain and play in front of La Liga, in front of his hometown, his home country fans? Does he want to stay in Germany? Is he settled in Germany and make the pivot to the biggest team in Germany, in Bayern Munich? Does he want to come to the Premier League? If so, is Tottenham a big enough draw? Is there enough reasons to come to Tottenham, excluding money, above some of the other players that are going to be, you know, some of the other teams that are going to be interested? I'd argue, look, you know, I don't expect to see him in a Tottenham shirt because I think he's a wonderful player, and as I say, £51 million. You know, there are teams that have money to spend. It's not like everybody's broke. And at the top end of the desirability pool in terms of teams to play for, that's where most of the money is around Europe. So, of course, if a team wants to come in and participate in the bidding process for the player that's of a bigger name than Tottenham, then it's going to be difficult to convince the guy to come. In terms of does he fit for Tottenham, 100%. You'd love to see that fluid rigidity be participated in with him sitting in that hole. You know, when we do that horseshoe football, when we struggle to break teams down, his technical close control, his gifted footwork, his ability to pick a pass with his left or his right foot, you know, his vision, his footballing IQ, all of that stuff gives you the kind of the boost gumps around the idea of him being able to unlock the door when playing that horseshoe football. That's been quite frustrating at times this season. So yeah, look, and of course him being able to drift to the left, play out on the left, play out on the right. There's situations where you could see him and James Maddison on the pitch at the same time would just be delicious to watch. You know, when you have the likely scenario where you're going to dominate possession and it's going to be a matter of time or knocking on the door against certain teams. It would be absolutely incredible to witness him in the Tottenham shirt for sure. I just think that, you know, there's the question marks around whether or not he, as I say, wants to play for for Tottenham versus some of the other teams that will be linked, and also whether or not, depending on our budgets, you want to drop a third of your net budget, give or take, maybe even more than that, 40% of your net budget before your outgoings on a player that is not in a position that is a must fix necessarily. Depends what we do with people like Gio Lo Celso, people like Hojbjerg, depends what we do with Richalison, depends what we do with Timo Werner, for example, and how the budget's going to be spent. But as a player, do I want him 100%? Do I think he'll come? Probably not. Next up on the list, guys, is Ollie Watkins, and his name has been mentioned by Brian King, ex-Tottenham scout, who goes on TalkSport, loves talking about Tottenham, and talks about how he would like to see, if he was still a scout at Tottenham, who he would be recommending. And he said that if Tottenham are going to receive a bid from Saudi Arabia for big money for Richarlison, Tottenham should accept it, so should Richarlison, let him move on. And then with that money, he said, if Tottenham are looking at players like Dominic Solanke, then why aren't we looking at players like Ollie Watkins? And it's a very reasonable question to ask. For me, I'm a big fan of Dominic Solanke. I think he is a gifted player. As I mentioned the last 3 or 4 videos, he's on the list of strikers we're linked with. He's not the top of my list by any stretch of the imagination, but I wouldn't hate it necessarily if he came in. There's a lot of risk about whether he is of the level that's going to take us to that next step. But there's evidence to suggest that he's playing his best football in a team that does play progressive football now at Bournemouth, and I think he's a good player, and there's more to come from him. But for me, do I rate him high enough to be massively pushing that name this summer? Probably not. With regards to Ollie Watkins, obviously this guy bangs in goals for Villa in a system that really suits him. It's worth pointing out with Ollie Watkins though that he can be a frustrating player. I think he's got more than double the amount of big chances. I could be wrong on this statistic, but in terms of big chances missed this season, I think he was like in the 20s, 23, 24 or something, and the next guy, then like second in the list, was like at 10 or 11. So I think, I might be wrong, but I think from memory, more than twice the amount of big chances missed for Ollie Watkins than for any other Premier League player. And if that's correct, then expect frustrations with Ollie Watkins. The system that Villa plays, beautiful football at times, and Unai Emery, especially at home, has created a magical kind of environment where Ollie Watkins could afford to miss the amount of chances he was missing and then still score however many goals he got in the end. 24, 25 goals was it? So for me, do you like Ollie Watkins 100%? Are you going to witness the same sort of thing happening at Tottenham? Probably. He's going to miss as many chances or more than players like Richarlison do. But you hope that he also puts away enough chances and that he gets his skill set of being in the right place at the right time to get those amount of opportunities is also going to be of a higher frequency than what you have with the current crop of Tottenham players, so that the net is more goals scored, more points on the board, higher league positions, and hopefully better successes in the cups. I like Ollie Watkins, and if Brian King is right, if the conversation is there about you sell Richarlison, look at Solanke. If you're going to look at Solanke, why not look at Watkins? Let me know your thoughts. Who do you prefer, Watkins or Solanke? I'm imagining you're all going to say Watkins, but let me know anyway. Next up on the list is another striker. I've talked about him 2 or 3 times now. Evanilson, Porto striker. 41 games played this season, 24 goals, something like that in all competitions. Maybe 6 or 7 assists as well. I really like this player. I've mentioned him 2 or 3 times. I think he's a really, really talented Brazilian striker. No questions about the talent of the player, none at all. Really strong, very good in the air, physically dominant, not slow, good with both feet, good finisher. Bangs in, like I say, a goal every other game. Great ratios. The question mark for me is where you place him on the list of priorities in terms of how much is it going to cost to get him, and then also what is the likelihood of struggles to transition? Is there risk there that you're not going to necessarily have to bake in with other players like a Dominic Solanke, like an Ollie Watkins, like a whoever you want, insert Premier League proven star there? If you go down the path of Portuguese strikers, Tottenham have been there before and it hasn't always worked out. A lot of teams have taken strikers from the Portuguese, he's not a Portuguese striker, but strikers from the Portuguese league, and it hasn't always proven to be a success, at least not initially. And next season for Tottenham, it has to be a successful season. It has to be, we can't have we need to minimise the risk as much as possible of delays in settling down. Next season, we have to come out of the blocks strong like we did last year. We have to also improve our ability to be resilient defensively and continue to go throughout the season. More games next season equals more risk with injuries, and etc. So for me, the question marks around Evan Nilsson are not so much about the player. I think he's a brilliant player. It's just about whether or not Tottenham want to take that risk of the transition and the step up and the time it takes to settle in. And I don't think that you'll see him at the club either. But look, those links that started out with Fajatius, for what it's worth, I think it was Fajatius that was the first time I saw the link, and they're usually terrible. Those links are strengthened now, and you're seeing him being mentioned by the Telegraph. And I think the Times have even mentioned him. And certainly the Express and the Sun and those guys have, the Daily Mail have. So they're starting to move from the kind of aggregators and the foreign ragtops to the kind of higher tier, higher caliber journalists in the UK press as well. So maybe there is some substance to it. Who knows? We will continue to find out as the season goes on. Next up is Joe Rodon. Today, of course, you've got the Championship final. Leeds against Southampton. Interesting for both teams, but for Tottenham specifically, if Leeds go up, what do they call it? The most expensive or the wealthiest game, or the richest prize in football, £140 million, basically comes to the winner over the course of a few seasons through the parachute payments and all that stuff who go up, whatever happens next season. So it's massive for Leeds, massive for Southampton. And to both teams, the outcome might mean certain things for certain players that Tottenham are looking at. First of all, Joe Rodon, who's been brilliant for Leeds, who certainly don't want this to be the last game for him. The Leeds fans all want to sign him permanently. Is that going to be something which is far more likely in a world where Joe Rodon and Leeds are playing Premier League football next season? I would argue it will be. It would also mean that they have more money to spend, so that Tottenham can probably get a higher price for the player who's done brilliantly for them. If Leeds don't make it today and stay down in the Championship, does Joe Rodon want to use Leeds as a sort of kicking stone to be able to move on to another Premier League team and use his performances as the demonstration of why other teams should trust him? Or would he be okay spending another season in the Championship and make the move permanent regardless? Either way, from a Tottenham perspective, in terms of Leeds and what's best interest for Tottenham and Joe Rodon, you'd probably be wishing for a Leeds United victory today. You could also strengthen that argument by looking at, if you were someone, and I think the people at Tottenham are doing this, who are looking at Kyle Walker-Peters as the solution to our squad rotation fullback, who can play on the right and play on the left. Lots of noise about Emerson Royal moving to Germany or to elsewhere, back to Spain potentially. And so if he was to leave, then Tottenham would need to go and find a fullback that can be utility. And obviously Kyle Walker-Peters ticks boxes in that regard. He also, of course, is homegrown and he was club trained, which is an important variable that we can't ignore when it comes to playing in UEFA. I'm not massively overwhelmed by the idea of signing Kyle Walker-Peters, as I mentioned 100 times on this channel. For me, you've got to ask questions why it was that of all of the players that were of high talent that left Southampton last season when they got relegated from the Premier League, or the season before, why is it that Kyle Walker-Peters went down with the ship? Where was his determination to kick on? If he's that good, then he should have had a bid and he should have been willing to leave and stay in the Premier League, but he wasn't. Either way, like I say, I'm not massively overwhelmed by the idea of it, but from all reports, Tottenham are. And so it would probably be more likely for him to leave Southampton if they were to stay down. And so if you're on board with that, and you're on board with Joe Rodon moving to Leeds on a permanent deal, then there's probably no reason why you wouldn't be rooting for Leeds United today in the playoff. Is it today? I think it's today in the playoff final. Next up is the name that won't go away, Sudakov, the Ukrainian player. I must have mentioned him 3 or 4 times on this channel now. I just think it's madness to think that he would leave Shakhtar Donetsk, that Shakhtar Donetsk and Tottenham would even consider negotiating, given the kind of bad blood that there is about how the chairman of Shakhtar has described the bad faith negotiations of Daniel Levy with regards Manor Solomon and all that stuff. I won't bore you with refresh that detail, but in a nutshell, Sudakov is a player that plays for them, and Tottenham are very much linked with him. He's been described as the next Luka Modric. I don't know whether he is or he isn't. I don't watch Ukrainian football, but very good player. But apparently £50 million is the asking price for him, and there's loads and loads and loads of top teams in Europe that are looking at this guy. If that's the case, then I don't expect him to come to Tottenham anyway, because like I say, if we're going to spend £50 million, do you go for a Sudakov or do you go for a Danny Olmo? For me, the answer is obvious who you go for. I'm not going to give it any more attention because I just don't see it as a feasible story, but it's everywhere again today that Tottenham are looking at Sudakov. And I think that's about it, guys, apart from if you take any interest in Stoke City. I've got no idea who this player is, but Wouter Berger is a story, a player, 23-year-old who joined them last season and apparently has done very well for them. And he's been linked again with Tottenham to come in. And to me, I really hope that story isn't true. Not to be presumptuous, and not that I know anything about this player at all, but it is it's a story that's a little bit underwhelming for me. That if Tottenham are going to, and the story goes, we're going to be selling players like Piere Emile Hojbjerg and possibly Yves Bissouma, and that Wouter Berger is the answer. Surely not. Again, I think it's probably lazy journalism, or at least I hope so, because if he was that good, surely he would have come across my radar slightly more than he has already. That's it for your transfer news, views and clues. 16 minutes in. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about Manchester United. What I will say is that, congratulations to them. They are the FA Cup champions. The FA Cup winners, deserved it. They were brilliant yesterday. And, it's an interesting dynamic and dilemma for what Manchester United now do. Had they already made a decision regarding sacking Erik ten Hag, presuming, as everyone did, that City would dominate and would win the Cup? And if they have, do they have to unwind that decision and realistically give him another season? If they do, is that the right decision? Well, look, the question marks are being asked around YouTube this morning, especially in Tottenham circles, as who had the better season, Tottenham or Manchester United? To me, it's an irrelevant question because both teams are on their different stages of their journey. Both teams are at different stages of their managerial process, their club project, if you like. They have different expectations going in. Manchester United are the team, I'm pretty sure, it's either them or Liverpool, depending on how you value certain trophies, but I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying that United are the most successful team in English football history. And so if any team's fans have a baseline expectation that a trophy is par for the course every single year, then it should be Manchester United fans that feel that way, given that they are the most successful team in English history. And yet, to them, to a lot of fans, it's still been a terrible season. And you can understand why. 99% of the season, they have been awful. They've been outplayed by the vast majority of teams in the Premier League. Generally, I say that the table doesn't lie, and that if you finish 8th, then you're the 8th best team. But I would make the argument in the case of Manchester United that actually they were quite fortunate in a lot of the games that they played earlier on in the season with VAR and with certain decision making that went their way and in performances that didn't match results. But you know what? I'm also someone that does stand to the notion that, for me, the best barometer of where you are as a football club is your league performance, because you can't avoid the variance, or there's less variance. And when I say variance, I don't mean with a TS, I mean with a CE, in your input and your output factors. You can't avoid playing the best teams twice, home and away. You can't avoid playing the worst teams. You'd hope that the refereeing decisions even themselves out. I know most people always think they don't and that they're always on the harsher side of the balance, but you would hope that, over the course of the season, injuries and all those variables generally kind of balance themselves out. And so it's an easier way to judge rather than just looking at things like cup competitions where, 6 games takes you from the FA Cup third round to the final, and depending on how lucky you get with the draw, injuries at the time you're playing the teams. Manchester United struggle with injuries all season, and then yesterday was the first time they had some of these players back, and look what happened. That's Erik ten Hag's sort of, perspective on it. To me, who had a better season? Well, if it comes down to output, then obviously Manchester United did. But I think if you're probably a Man United fan and you've witnessed that over the entire season, 99.9% of your season has been awful and annoying, frustrating, disappointing, anger, inciting anger in you, and then you manage to pull it out of the bag at the most important minute. Are you going to remember that one game, or are you going to remember the 50 that you played and were frustrated with, and the embarrassing situation they faced in Europe and all that stuff? I would argue that they still had a disappointing season, but at the end of the day, it depends on your priorities, and lifting a trophy is, to a lot of people, the be-all and end-all of football. So And for Tottenham fans, I think that you'll probably have the recency bias of remembering the last 10 games more than you'll remember the first 10 games. But if you can stretch your mind back, you remember that after 10 games, we were talking about title challenges. We were singing, about I'm loving Big Ange instead after 2 or 3 games. Everything was going fantastically well until it suddenly wasn't. And I think you also have to bake in the other variables around losing and not replacing your star striker, the philosophical pivot of the football club, the managerial pivot. So many young players coming in, taking time to embed. We're going through our own process, and so the argument really is an irrelevant one. But congratulations to Manchester United anyway. I did notice this morning on Twitter that Daniel Levy, or Levy out, I think was trending. ENIC out was trending on Twitter, as it usually is whenever there's an opportunity to bash him. And for me, I find it odd. I don't think it has any relationship to Levy out at all. But to those who want to, like I say, people that don't want to be sad, they want to be angry. There's always that kind of that way of feeling, and I get it. Like I always say, feel how you want to feel. When you're a Tottenham fan, being so close but so far for so long, I feel like every opinion is somewhat valid. I just happen to feel the way I do, and I don't think that Daniel Levy is the root of all of our problems or the underlying common denominator. If there has to be a common denominator which explains the absence of trophies over the last 25 years, if there has to be one, and for me, people need to zoom out a little bit and look at things outside of Tottenham rather than just looking at the insular perspective, because if you do, you'll see bigger underlying problems, underlying common denominators that equivocate with the outcome where 95%, I think it is now, of all trophies that could have been won in the English system under Daniel Levy's tenure at Tottenham have been won by the same 5 teams. 3 of those teams have always been bigger, always been the most successful teams in English football. And the other 2 are relative newcomers, but have been the beneficiaries of obscene wealth before the rules were in place to protect other teams from that wealth. And on top of that, both teams have been accused of not only accelerating their growth because of that wealth, but also breaking the rules. In the case of City, 115 times. In the case of Chelsea, not sure how many times, but so there's like a double-edged sword to the kind of success that they've brought to the table. Not only wealth, but potential corruption, potential rule breaks as well. So it's a difficult juggling act, but I prefer to zoom out and look at the factors that have influenced success for every team, and would say that if 95% of all success comes down to 5 teams, then if you're going to hold your own chairman accountable, then the same thing could be said by every single fan base of 99.9% of clubs in the English footballing system. That the common denominator of why you fail is because of the chairman. However long they've been there, it doesn't matter. But like I say, to each their own. I'm going to leave it there because it's 22 minutes. Like, subscribe and comment. I'll see you tomorrow. As always, have a great day. Bye-bye.